Good evening.
Evening.
How are you?
So far, so good.
Good.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good.
Let's see. There we go. Okay, we're recording again. Good evening. This is Mels 603 at 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, those of you who joined me live this evening. As always, we'll start with our weekly schedule. This is week 4, Wednesday, February 5th at 7 o'clock. This week, we're going to be talking about principal tort liability, malfeasance, nonfeasance, and misfeasance, which is basically you didn't do anything, nonfeasance, you did the wrong thing, misfeasance, you intentionally did the wrong thing, or you maliciously did the wrong thing, which is malfeasance. And we'll talk about those 3 things tonight. We'll relate them to law and ethics. That's our task tonight, and so that's what we're going to cover. We just finished up our first unit on school safety, crisis boxes, emergency plans, what to do in the case of an accident. You've done really well on that. From last week's, again, main thing, call 911 immediately. Don't delay in any way. That's considered nonfeasance. You didn't do something you should have done. And usually they ask you why. You're not a medical professional. Why didn't you call 911? So that would be an example of misfeasance. Also, don't talk to the media. Don't talk on cell phones where people can overhear you. There's FERPA laws involved in that, and other privacy matters. Don't talk to the media. And so we've covered that one pretty much. This week you were to reflect on educators have been found financially responsible, again, on the basis of negligence. That negligence is based on misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance. That's the standards for negligence. And we're going to cover each of those tonight. Most everybody has got their OMA Task 1 in. Those have all been very good. And I'm very pleased. If I referred you to your coach, make sure you work with your coach if you were missing some pieces. I do want to remind you, I've had this question come up several times. I put a pacing guide out. It's on our weekly schedule. There's no penalty for late work. I accept work but this is the pacing guide. You got to learn to pace yourself. Remember, we talked about gradual release this semester, or intentional abandonment, whatever you want to call it. I put out a pacing guide. Try to stick with it, but it's up to you. The work is open every week. I don't hide anything. You can turn it in on time. You can then turn it in early. Now, the good thing about Task 1 is it's the most comprehensive of the tasks, but the good thing is it's backed up against Task 2, which is a 30-minute ordeal. Please remember, OMA Task 2 is the last evidence you did last semester, the APTEL. It's the first 3 tasks, and make sure it's all 3, because the 3rd task is the one that's most important in that one. That's the one that's got the actual professional growth plan in it. It's the first 3 tasks of the APTEL with all the APTEL labels and directions taken off of it. You take all that off, put it together in one document, boom, OMA Task 2 is done. So basically, you had 2 weeks to do Task 1 to stay on pace, because it's only going to take you about 30 minutes to do Task 2. And then the following week, we get to Task 3. So you should be moving into Task 2. When you post your work for me, I'll tell you one of 3 things. What you're missing, what you're missing is more than I can deal with, and I'm going to send you to your coach, or it's good, continue with peer review, let somebody review it for you, and then move on to the next task. Now, if I've given you feedback and there's nothing you're missing and you feel strongly, you can go ahead and submit that task for assignment Dropbox for your grade and just keep on moving. If you get a peer review, that's great. If you don't, that's great. But don't get caught up in waiting for somebody all the time. Now, you've already figured out I grade every day, twice a day. And so I'm not going to hold you up. We're going to keep the train moving. But it's up to you to pace yourself. I've given you guidelines here of what I think it's going to take, the metrics you need to hit in order to stay on pace. But again, I am not going to count off work or points, or I'm not going to send you notices. Hey, you got to pace yourself. I gave you the guide, pace yourself. And if you do that, you'll be fine. All right. Anybody have any questions on pacing, what the expectation is for OMA Task 2? Again, it's the first 3 tasks of the APTEL, the second one you did last semester. First 3 tasks, take the labels, the directions off, copy and paste. That's it. You're good to go. You're golden. We'll move right on through. Anybody have any questions on those things? All right. I want to talk to you about 2 weeks from tonight. Somebody asked where the Zoom link. Remember, the Zoom link is always on the course overview page. It stays right here, and it has the dates that we're going to meet. I want to talk to you now about 2 weeks from now. All right, so 2 weeks from now, we're going to come online. You're going to, as a group, you should start making your plans now to get together in a Zoom group and put together your PowerPoint presentation. You answer the questions for the case study. You review the relevant law. I've given you the lesson plan, roll the principle with ethics, because you have to review every case study in terms of the law and policy in your district. And then you also have to apply the ethical paradigm. So I've got that one pulled up here. All right, so the very first thing, and why it's our first case study, again, it's about grading. That's the one that you heard Dr. Massengill tell you last week that you're going to have to deal with pretty much every day, something to do with grading. That's the one that can trip you up. So here is the law that says it's your responsibility to actually grade a student. The teacher recommends and you do the final grade. So in your first case study, the teacher has recommended her grade. She has manipulated the grading scale of her district and her school so that a class assignment counts more than 50% of the final grade. And on that basis, she has failed the child for the year. She's excluded him from his education for a year. And even though he has the option, an alternative assignment, which would be to go to summer school, he's still excluded for a year on the basis of one class grade on one class assignment. So it says right here that it's your responsibility to either defend, support, or deny that recommendation from the teacher. There's a lot of other pieces and moving parts. If it were me, I would look at my district's policy on grading. Just like me, my grading system supports that of the institution that I work for. So on the course overview page, you probably hadn't sat and given it much thought, but you see my points system. Total points are 5,000, and I've got what you got to get to each one of those. Now, what I had to do was I had to weight each of the assignments so that it came out the right way. The OMA has to count so many points. The discussion boards has to count so many points. And the skip has to count so many points. And then the case studies have to count so many points. And so the way that I have done them, the major assignments count 30% each. That's the skip and the OMA. So that's 60. The class assignments count 30. And then the outside assignments, which are the case studies, count 10. If you went back and you parted out my points, it would go 30, 30, 30, 10. That's what the university says. They define how much each of those should count. And so that discussion board counts for class participation. That's 10%. And that's 30%. That's 30%. Outside assignments can only count 10%. So I had to go back and calculate. So y'all folks aren't interested in all the behind the scenes math, but what I've got on the screen here is then how that translates into how many points that you've got to get for the grades that you would earn in the class. But I had to set up my point system based on how many points each one of them should count on that 5,000 point scale. And so I get questions, well, why do I get 100 points for this task, 100, and I get 100 for the whole of it together? Well, I had to weight it enough that it counted 30%. And that's the way I do it. And I had to be careful that I couldn't have just one turn in count 500 points, because that's too much weighting for the percentage that activity can count in your total grade. I have to do that at the university level. Obviously, you have to do that in the school level. You have district policy on grading. As I told you, the State Board of Education and General Assembly says that standardized tests can't count more than 30%. They can't count less than 20, can't count more than 30. Your local district adopts a policy in terms of how much standardized tests integrate in a course test count. They have a policy on how much homework counts, how much class assignments, class participation. They have all of those things. But no one thing can count more than 30% anywhere, across the board, state law. Nothing can count more than 30. And that's state testing, and that's the most. You can decide for it to count as little as 20 in your district, but nothing can count more than 30. In this case study, a class assignment is counting more than 50%. That's the piece of this you've got to focus on. Don't worry about who his uncle is or what superintendent said or teachers union. No. Focus on the critical component is the teacher manipulated the grade system, her grade system, so that one class assignment counted more than half of the yearly grade. Go. All right, that's enough on that one. But make sure that you've applied the law. Again, the law is this. You got to be the one that makes the decide. And then the policy is the grading system for your school or school district. You apply those two things first, and then you apply the ethical paradigm. And there are 4: justice, care, critique, and profession. You apply each of those to this situation and see how this administrator's actions and the teacher's actions would stack up in the, to the law, to policy, and to the ethical paradigm. Those are the 3 things that keep you out of court or from losing in court on a negligence lawsuit. Malfeasance, misfeasance, nonfeasance. Those are the 3 functions of negligence. And that's what you're trying to avoid here, is not losing your house. All right, so that's coming up in 2 weeks. You need to, if you've got all your Zoom teams together, everybody should have a Zoom team. You should know how to get together with one another. You can go to discussion board. The first activity on discussion board was to put your contact information in. Make sure you get your teams together, get your PowerPoint put together. And I'm going to turn the class over to you in 2 weeks, and you folks are going to be presenting. This is your chance to talk and give your ideas. And then when we get through, you're going to write a reflection of the process. Anything you want to write that you've learned or taken away, or good, bad, or indifferent from the process. So that's what we're going to do in 2 weeks. Next week, we're transitioning from safety, security to negligence. And then next week, we'll start on discipline. Anybody have any questions on our modules or our flow, or which way we're going, what we're doing? Hopefully it all makes sense and it's laid out in a logical sequence where you can understand it. So let me get started with tonight. All right. This is Zoom session 4, the role of the principal. And so tonight, with the backdrop of negligence, you got to know what the law is. You got to know each section of the law that governs your responsibilities as a principal. You've got to know this is the law, and I'm going to point out the pitfalls of where you're most likely to get kickback problems, those things. And then we're going to talk about two the hottest things that get you sued, and one of them is letting the little things become the big things. That's nonfeasance, ignoring problems. Little things become the big things. And then we'll talk about bullying, which again, that's become the hot topic, whether it's cyberbullying or face-to-face bullying. That's generating the bulk of lawsuits right now against schools and school administrators. And it's basically on nonfeasance, they knew it and didn't do anything about it, or B, they knew about it and they maliciously or malfeasance, they took steps to suppress the person who was making the report, and I'll tell a story on that. Unfortunately, I was in a school this week. I visited one of my interns this week. And the reason I went is because her school's in transition. Her principal disappeared this week. Went home at the end of one day and was not the principal the next morning. Based on an investigation from an incident back in October of nonfeasance. Had a report that an inappropriate thing happening on campus and did not pursue it, hoping that it would go away. The investigation completed this week. Obviously, it was confidential, and faculty showed up middle of the week and no principal. I was there this week to help in the transition with our intern, my intern, to the assistant principal to read her into what her responsibilities were until they can get a new principal on board, and to put a secondary plan in place if our intern cannot continue interning in that school. I've made arrangements for her to intern at a sister school nearby. This week, folks, this is none of this stuff is hypothetical. That's what I had to spend one of my days this week doing. It's real. The initial case was from back in October of 2019. The principal was suspended with pay, put on leave, came back. The investigation concluded, and it didn't go well for the principal. So there we go. And it was a case of nonfeasance. Had a report and decided to not act upon the report. So this stuff is real, it's relevant, it's today, it's this week, it's now. So let me start with the role of the principal, and I'm going to go through these. If you need me to slow down, I will, but I'm going to go through each of these, and I will kind of tell you where the pitfalls are on each of these. First is to grade and classify pupil. Our first case study speaks directly to this one. Arbitrary and capricious are the standards that we're trying to make sure that we clear. Arbitrary is that we treat one student different than another. And that's real easy when students are in different classrooms in the same grade level or in the same course. One teacher gives this grade, one gives that grade, and there's no rhyme or reason as to why they got the grades. Or this student in the class got an A and this one got a C. They did, and there's no documentation to support that. As to why this one got an A and this one got a C, that would be arbitrary. Capricious is that we give more punishment than the law allows. That's the case of Bobby in our first case study. The law says that Bobby could fail the assignment and could get a day of in-school suspension. But nowhere in the law does it say Bobby can fail for the year. That's capricious. That's given more consequence or punishment than the policy or the law allows for. And so you got to be careful with testing and grading, that you follow the state and the district policy on grading, and make sure that there's inter-rater reliability between your teachers, that their grading system is the same, and that the teacher's grading system within the same room is consistent. That's why you see my points posted. It doesn't matter who makes 4,500 points in this course. You get your work in, it gets graded in Blackboard, you get your points. You look under my grade, you see how many points you've got. I look at them every day. When I pop up Full Grade Center, it has everybody's name and it has their point total right next to it. That's how you get your grade in this class. If you've got 4,500, you get an A. If you're General or Cindy or Jeanette, doesn't matter. You get 45, you get your A. You get 3,000, you get that grade as well. And so that's not being arbitrary. That's the standard on grading within a classroom. Then you've got to make sure that you got 3 fourth grade classrooms. The grading system is the same. Students get roughly the same grade for the same work in each of the 3 classes. And that your overall grading system for your school falls in line with that of the school district, which has adopted their policies on top of the state policy. That's how it goes. That's how grading works. And again, it tells you clearly right here on the screen who is the one person responsible to make sure all that happens. You heard Dr. Massengill talk. I don't know if he's with us tonight, but you heard him tell us last week this is something that he has to deal with every day, because it's his responsibility. If it goes wrong, ultimately it comes and boomerangs back on him. And so that's the one you've got to be most, those are the ideas or the issues that are most important when you're talking about grading and classifying students. Make accurate reports to the superintendent and the school board. The 2 that will get you here is the SAR and the PMR. All right, what are these acronyms? PMR is Principal Monthly Report of Attendance. We've already discussed and talked about, and we'll talk more at length when we get to the Leandro case about how schools are funded. But understand, money comes not for the number of students that you have enrolled, but rather money comes to you from the number of students that you have that attend. So it says you have to make accurate reports. You file this report with the superintendent, who then electronically sends it to Raleigh. You can't be counting students present that aren't, because there's money. That's how we vouch your money back from the state. That's how the local gives you money. That's how the federal government gives the district money, is based on the student enrollment that attends, not just the enrollment, but the attending enrollment. How many of them show up? That's how you're funded. So that's the first of the accurate reports that you've got to make. And it says down here at the bottom, daily attendance of pupil in public school, payroll data sheets, other reports, but it's a misdemeanor if you get those wrong. That means you lose your license and lose your job. And daily attendance is the biggest one. Now, payroll data sheets, that's for your classified employees, your custodians. Now, some of the larger districts, now, when I worked in 2 of each. When I worked in the smaller districts, I was responsible to hire and supervise cafeteria staff, custodial staff, bus drivers, etc. When I worked in Charlotte, when I was principal there, that was all done for me. We had supervisor of custodians, we had supervisor at the bus, all that stuff. The only people I had was the certified staff, and they're not on timesheets. But if you're in a district where the principal is responsible for non-certified employees, they have timesheets. You've got to make sure that they work the number of hours that they say, and that they're there and they document, and that you don't allow them, even if they want to, that you don't allow them to work beyond the number of hours that they're allowed to work each week. Otherwise, the district's on the hook for overtime. The exception to that is teacher assistants. Teacher assistants, you may have to, even though you're in a large district, you may have to document on timesheets your teacher assistants as well. But they're kind of in between your non-certified and certified. So some districts don't have them do that. They just have them report 7.5 hours each day for a total of 37.5 a week. Some districts make them do timesheets, some don't. So you'll need to find that out. Now, here's the thing about them. You have to be really careful about teacher assistants having them work extra duties beyond their allotted time, because Department of Labor says if they do, even if they volunteered, if you let them, you got to pay them. So you need to find out about that in your district, and you've got to make accurate reports on the hours that they've worked. If you don't, you're going to get in trouble with those. The other accurate report that you have to make is your PMR, your principal's monthly report. And you say, well, what in the world is that? It's your master schedule. That's our biggie this semester, is the master schedule. That thing has to be, I told you, it's not about creating one, it's about creating a legal one. Remember, I told you that first night, that our goal this semester was to create a legal master schedule. Your master schedule, I don't care how you do it, if you do it on the whiteboard in the principal's office with the stickies, or you do it on a chart, it has to be translated and put in PowerSchool. And it better be, and what's in PowerSchool better be what happens when I walk down the hall and do an audit in your building. That teacher should be in that room with that group of kids. You can't put down that we've got 2 classes of kids over here with 30 in each one of them. When I walk down the hall, there's 45 in one and 15 in the other. Oh no, that won't go well. See, that's fraud, and that will, again, that's a class 1 misdemeanor. So whatever your master schedule is, it better be translated correctly into PowerSchool, and that better be what it is. And it speaks to class size, it speaks to teacher certification, it speaks to highly qualified, it speaks to number of minutes of instruction in all the core academic areas, it speaks to planning time, it speaks to duty-free time. All these things are state laws, and you have to conform to all the state laws, and all of those things are represented in your master schedule, which has to be uploaded and updated weekly in PowerSchool, and it produces a report called the School Activity Report, SAR. It produces, that's an acronym from PowerSchool. It produces the School Activity Report, which is the electronic version of your master schedule. That's that accurate. So that thing better be accurate. It cannot say one thing and another thing be happening in your school. If somebody says, I'm not getting my planning time, and they come out and look what you've got on your SAR, it says, well, you got this time. The teacher says, no, I've got a class during that time. That means I'm going to have to come out and visit your assistant principal while we're transitioning to the new principal. Don't make me have to do that. I do not like those visits. It hurts my soul. But you got to make accurate reports. There's others in there. But again, school activity report, master schedule, attendance, and then your timesheets for your non-certified personnel. Those are the 3 biggies. That's where you get caught. That's where you get sued. That's where things go wrong for you. To improve instruction and community spirit, you have to give suggestions. I love that, suggestions, to teachers for improvement of instruction. Simply said, you have to have a professional development plan. Why do you think we had you do that one, and why do you think that's the second thing that we do in this course? The law says you have to have a plan for improving instruction. It's called professional development or professional growth plan. The reason why we had you build one last semester, it's the law. You got to have one. When the superintendent comes out and says, all right, what are you doing to improve instruction? All you have to say is, here's the plan. It's research-based. It uses our data. This is our plan for improving instruction. Now, that's different than the school improvement plan, which is about improving grades and scores in certain areas. This is, what are you going to do for your teachers to get better in the room? Professional growth plan. You've got to have one. If you don't have one, it will not go well for you. Again, that's the law. That's your legal responsibility. And if you don't have one, that's nonfeasance. You didn't act when you were told legally you had to act and have a plan for an improvement of instruction. You didn't have one. That would be nonfeasance. You just didn't do it. All right. We've covered this one a couple of times. This is the one you got to do your safety inspections and fire drills. Fire drill once a month, safety inspection twice a month. I gave you an assessment inventory to do your twice monthly safety inspections. You need to document those. What you run into here, if you don't do your fire drill, that's nonfeasance. If you don't do it and file a false report that you did, that's malfeasance. So nonfeasance is you didn't do it at all. Malfeasance is you faked it. Boy, they will get you if you fake it. Misfeasance would be is you didn't run it the right way, or you didn't follow your own plan and then something went wrong. And so that's the biggie. And again, same thing for your safety inspections. Misfeasance is you didn't look all over. You just looked around and said, yeah, everything looks good. And you didn't go through a process that you could document. Malfeasance is you knew something was wrong, but you didn't act to fix it. You knew that back door was, the lock didn't work, but you ignored it anyway, or you knew that they were propping the door between the main building and the gym open during the day, or they were chaining the doors. You knew those things and you didn't correct it. That would be malfeasance. And so that's the biggie on that one. And it tells you all of these things that you have to do here. And so let me catch this question. All right, so Mary asked a great question here, and this goes back to the last one. Sorry I didn't get to you, Mary. I didn't see it pop up. Mary said on teachers, on non-certified staff, and do they have to document it on their timesheet? And that goes back to your district policy. They get paid for 37 and a half hours a week. That averages 7.5 hours a day. They're generally there for 8 hours. And so that means that they're generally there for either 7.5, somewhere between 7.5 and 8 hours. If it's 7:45, they get a 15-minute break. If they get 2 15-minute breaks, if they're required to be there between, from 8 to 4, if they're there for that length of time. Some districts have amended their teacher assistants to only be there for 7.5 hours, and then they don't have break time factored in. Some of them have them there 7.5, and they still give them break time. And so the way it kind of works is this: if they're there for 8 hours and they don't have to document their breaks. If they're for 7.5 hours and they give them break time in that, they do have to document their breaks because they're being paid for 7.5. So if they're allowed breaks, but they only have to be there for 7.5, the general rule of thumb is yes, they have to document their break time because we can't let them, remember, they're on the clock. We're paying them. We can't let them have an hour. Now, if they're there for 8 hours and that half hour extra is built in that they're technically not being paid for, we don't normally make them document their break time there. So again, it goes back to what your district requires. 7.5 hours, got to document your break time because you're on our dime. 8 hours, you're on your dime, don't have to document. That's the rule of thumb. I hope that's probably not very clear, but hopefully that's an explanation that you'll understand. I see Dr. Massengill has just come in. Boy, he's got on my last nerve here. Compensate. Be careful with compensatory time. It will nail you. All right, let me be clear here. Thank you, Dr. Massengill. You just stirred me up. Let me be very clear here. Legally, there is no such thing as compensatory time. Now, you can argue and you can say, but wait, we do. I'm telling you, before we get into this conversation, legally, there is no such thing as compensatory time. You are not allowed to give comp time because it is not a legal thing. Think about compensatory time. What we're saying is we'll pay you for hours that you didn't work and let you work those at another time. We can't legally say we can't legally pay you for time you didn't work if you're non-certified. Comp time is not a thing. I know there might be principals that run a little comp time or do this, that, and the other. It sounds wonderful until you get caught. Again, it's all fun and games till somebody gets their eye put out. And then you've got no legal leg to stand on whatsoever. You can't go to court and argue, well, we've always done it, or it's a nice little bonus. It's a nice thing to do for teachers. That will not go well in court. I can tell you that right now. There is no such thing as comp time. It is not a legal standard. It is not legally defined. It is not a thing. And so if you do it, and you do it because it's, one of those political things, you go along to get along kind of thing, it's all well and good until there's a problem with it. Somebody doesn't come back and do the time that you paid them for it, and then they don't come back and do their comp time. What do you do then? Or they're on your timesheet, and we had this happen in Charlotte. Like when a classified staff member leaves or dies and has accrued 100+ hours of comp time, and you get a bill from payroll because they had to cash that employee out. You gave it to them. You got to pay it. That would be you out of your check. But on a somber note here, and we had this to happen more than once in a large district like Charlotte. People who were taking comp time and weren't on their duty station got hurt, injured, or got in trouble with the law on time that we were paying them for. That does not go well. That's not a good look in the community. And Doug just pointed out, these people, they keep a record of it, and then they demand it, that you gave it to them, and the district has to pay it out. They come back to you. And that's the least of your worries, is paying it, because there's going to be a pound of flesh that comes along with them having to pay that. So, my message to everybody that I've ever taught in this course for the last 10 years is don't get into comp time. So now, when certified work sports and use of comp time, where that's not legal, no, it's not legal. There is no legal protection for comp time. No. You can assign certified people, you can assign them to work those things with no expectation of extra pay. That's part of their duties. Yes, if you can, that's what we're learning this semester, is you're responsible for the supervision. That's your duty roster. During the day, you're also responsible for evening supervision of activities. Principals can assign those duties to teachers and have to. They're certified. They're not hourly employees. The law says, and any other duties the principal assigns. That's the law. As Doug said, there's no mechanism in the state personnel manual for comp time. That is correct. It is not a legal thing. Teachers have a minimum required workday, and most all have a minimum required workday. They have that plus any other duties, and that's what I was just referring to. The teacher's legal responsibility is their required workday plus any assigned duties from the principal. So yes, you can legally assign teachers to cover athletic events nights, evenings, and weekends. You have to, in order to have adequate supervision. If you don't, that's going to be a misfeasance or a nonfeasance, a negligence lawsuit. You didn't have adequate supervision. You didn't have enough people in the cafeteria during the day, 1 to 45. Yeah, they're going to sue you. You're going to lose. You didn't have anybody covering the ball game in the evening. You're going to lose. So we're talking about certified personnel. That's why you got to be careful not to assign teacher assistants extra duties. They're hourly. You have to pay them. So you can't require your teacher assistants to come back and cover ball game duties. You could use them at some level of supervision during the day when they're on your payroll, but not in the evenings, afternoons, weekends. You can't do that because they're hourly employees. But teachers, you can. And there is no expectation. If you'll remember last week, I talked to you about the first attempt in the 80s at differentiating pay for teachers. One of those was extra duty, extra pay. It lasted 1 year. They ran out of money about halfway through. But yes, we have attempted to pay teachers for those extra duties. It did not go well. It cost too much money. And so that's now all been rolled into your contract. So your contract now that you sign as a teacher says you've got the minimum required workday plus any extra duties signed by your principal. You signed a contract that said that you understood that. So that's why I said it's a really, really bad practice for a principal to put sign-up sheets in the workroom or the lounge or wherever and say, how about signing up for this ball game on Thursday night? No, you assign those duties. You rotate them, but you assign those duties. And then you hold people accountable to make sure that they're there. What if nobody signs up? It looks like it's going to be raining Thursday afternoon. I'm not signing up for that. By posting that sign up, you have what you have told a teacher. What you've said is this is optional. It is not optional. So somebody's raised their hand. I don't know.
That's me, Shawana.
Okay.
I think the verbiage was confusing me about the comp time. What we have where I'm at, it's coded as flex time. So they work the game, they earn hours, not money. Is that legal?
No.
Okay.
That's just another way. That's just another way of saying comp time. Now, districts are doing flex times, but there's a different, and I'm going to let Dr. Massengill, he's popped up here. I'm going to let him address flex time, which is different than comp time.
Yeah. So,
okay.
So what some districts will do, including mine, like at my school, and our personnel director does not like this, and neither does our personnel attorney. I will say that up front. And they will tell you this would not hold up if we had an employee conflict. And so you do it at your own peril, but we all do it. Is we will assign flex time for employees that go above and beyond. But that's not for game duty. That's for stuff above and beyond routine supervision. So if
when they come set up a classroom early.
Yeah. So
or run a club.
Well, for something where it would not be involved in supervision that every staff member would be expected to do. So for instance, if I needed an employee to come in for an event where all employees weren't expected to be there and help me do something, then what I will give them, because we're the Wildcats, a Paul pass that documents how much time they spent, and then it expires a year from that date. And our finance department's okay with that. The problem is, well, there's a lot of problems with it. The next principal that comes in does not have to honor it. because it's not a legal thing. It's sort of a quid pro quo type thing that we're working out, which is why the attorneys don't like it. But there's no personnel mechanism to track that in the finance system. So,
Okay.
I mean, really, there is no such thing as flex time. It's sort of a gentleman's agreement that principals will work out with staff members. And that can only happen with your certified staff members. It can't happen with classified. The other thing
Yes.
I was going to share about the minimum required workday, I had a situation like this just yesterday with my middle school folks where I was in a parent meeting, and a parent was requesting after school tutoring for their kid. And the teacher responded, sitting right in front of me, well, my day is over at 3:30. I don't tutor. Well, we have a board policy 3221, which probably all of you have because we go through the School Board Association for our school board policies. And it says that teachers have a minimum required workday and that their duties end only when the needs of students have been met. In other words, if that student needs tutoring, the teacher under their contract, if I assign them to do so, is legally obligated to do that without additional flex time, pay, anything. Because teachers don't have a maximum workday, they have a minimum workday.
That
Which
is correct.
anytime that you assign them to work, they are required to work.
And any other duties assigned by the principal. That's what your contract says. And if your board has a policy, you can't leave until the work is done, and work is tutoring. And by the way, you can't charge tutoring. You can't charge students that are under your normal supervision. You cannot charge them. And most board policies say you can't charge a student in your school. The law says you can't charge a student under your direct supervision for tutoring. Most board policies say you can't charge one in your school at all. And even some, I've seen some that say you can't charge one from the same district. So as most places, if I'm teaching at Central and somebody over at East, I could tutor them. But some boards have gone even further and said, nope, you can't tutor anybody in this district for pay. You can't do that, but you definitely can't do one of your own students for pay. And normally, and you can't do one in your own school. That's across the board in both states. You can't do one in your own school for pay. And even some have gone further and said, look, we're not getting into this. You can't tutor anybody that comes in this school district for extra pay. We can't stand the legal exposure of that. We're not getting into that. But Dr. Massengill is 1,000% correct. Flex time is, again, it's not legal. The board attorney doesn't like it. The HR people don't. Nobody likes it, and they'll tell you we can't support it in court. If you do it at your own risk. And even then, there's some parameters. It can't be that, and other duties assigned by the principal can't be in that category of things that we're going to have a ball game on Thursday. It can't be that. It's got to be one-off kind of things that are above and beyond, and other duties assigned by the principal. That caveat. It can only be for something like that. And
then
even
they can only be used on days that students are not in session. So
that
they
is
can
correct. And even then, there's more things that go. And even then, the board attorney will tell you you're playing with fire. You're just asking to lose your job. They'll tell you up front. We're advising you not to. We're not going to stop you. But if you do this, you're on your own. Now, what that means is if you get sued, that the district will not give you legal representation. They don't know you. You're on your own. You got to hire your own attorney. That's the bottom line on that is you got to hire your own attorney. When it goes wrong, it's on you. The district will accept no liability or exposure for that, for flex time. So there is no such thing as comp time. Doesn't work at all. That's out. Flex time is very specific, small. Again, it's not legal. It's allowable, but you're on your own. Got to get your own attorney. And so what I'm here to tell you tonight is don't do it. Don't do it unless you're just absolutely forced to, and then use it very judiciously. And even then, there's some faculty members you could use it with. Others, you can't. Now, again, I'll go back to I tease the dean all the time. he gives out little cards for people who go above and beyond because we can't give comp time again. You know, you have a contract, you work your contract, you can't pay you anymore. The university does not allow that. It doesn't matter. So if you come on a Saturday for a recruitment or orientation or a bulldog day or whatever, he gives you a little card. And I'm always teasing him. I said, they didn't take this over to the grocery store. It was cash only. But again, it has no monetary value. It's a nice gesture. And I'm kind of torn myself on, I know teachers have an expectation that of comp time or flex time or whatever, but I would certainly try to get away from that. I don't know if I'd give the little cards or not, because that just kind of highlights the fact that you couldn't pay them. It's the thought that counts, I guess. So I have seen that. I've seen T-shirts. I've seen cards. I've seen little plaques. We do in the School of Education at Gardner Webb, they do a faculty member of the year. And you get your picture taken, standing holding a little plaque, and it runs for a whole year on the marquee in the building and all that business. I believe if you go to Craig Hall right now, I believe you'll see my picture. That says more about the competition than me. So I am the reigning faculty member of the year, but it had zero financial compensation. That's just, hey, it's nice. That's okay. And that's not a humble brag. I mean, you've probably seen the picture. I would say anything. But no, there was no financial remuneration that came with that. There was no time off or any of those kinds of things. So maybe, yeah, jean passes. You wear jeans on Friday or something like that. I would. The reason I said this, I would try to find creative ways to reward them that didn't have to do with time, if at all possible. It's just such legal exposure if you're trading time. That's just and nowhere is it legal. It's always going to come back to bite you. Try to figure out more creative ways to do it. I mean, I know that plaque that they gave me didn't cost more than $7 or $8, and one picture on a cell phone, and but it was the thought that counted, I guess. And that's very nice, and the little cards and things. I mean, you gotta find creative ways when you're not allowed to trade time or money. And I'd get out of the time business if at all possible. Kimberly said jean passes. Well, see, now I'll tell you from my own personal experience, the problem with jeans passes is you have to have a dress code that doesn't allow jeans, and you have to enforce it for jean passes to work. I was a high school principal, and I said, no blue jeans, no tennis shoes. You would have thought that I had slapped them. And I said, no. No jeans, no tennis shoes. If you got to bring me a doctor's note for tennis shoes. I have one who did. Got some doctor, a podiatrist, to write her a prescription for tennis shoes. Okay. But other than that, but then you get into that whole thing. What happens if teachers wear jeans whenever they want to? And that kind of takes the reward out of having a jean day. And so that's another whole administrative layer that you have to add if you're going to do that. All right. To discipline students and assign duties to teachers with regard to discipline, well-being, and medical care. That general well-being, that's that part where you can assign teachers to supervision, because that's their general well-being. Again, it says right there that you have the right to do that. You're legally required to do that. That you have to assign duties to teachers with regard to discipline. That's supervision. That's duty roster during the day. So E right here is the legislation that says teachers have to do their duty. You can assign them duty schedule during the day, cafeteria duty, car duty, and then general well-being, supervision, and medical care of students. says it right here, and that the law gives you the opportunity to use reasonable force in disciplining students. Corporal punishment's a no-no. Everybody knows that. Now, corporal punishment's not just paddling. You can't make them run laps or banks or steps, or can't do anything physical, hold a book on their head, stand in the corner. That's all corporal punishment. That's a no-no. That's all against the law. So make sure that you understand that you are required to do those things, and you're required to assign teachers to do those things. Again, with no remuneration. We're talking about certified. That's part of their job. And other duties assigned by the principal, that's it, E, right there. That's the law that covers that. Discipline and well-being, that's what supervision is, discipline and well-being. Keep them safe, keep them behaving, and keep them safe. So that's the part that covers duty roster and supervision schedule. When I'm asked all the time, well, where in the laws that say that we have to do this stuff? Well, right there in E, 288, 115C, 288E. That's where it says it, right there. Black and white, can't miss it. All right, to protect school property, again, that's what that assessment inventory helps you do, to assess your property and keep it from getting torn up. You're responsible to make sure that your property is in good working condition and well kept and nobody's destroying it. We're going to cover this one in a session. Report certain acts to law enforcement. We've talked about that. You have to report acts of crime and violence to the police, and there's all other kind of reporting laws of other infractions. They all have to go into the state. We'll talk about that. We'll have a one-night session on that. And we get down here to the end. I see my time. We're right on time. To make available school budgets and school improvement plans. I'm continually amazed at how many of our students will come back and say the principal says they don't share the school improvement plan, or the principal doesn't share the budget. Yes, you do. The law says you do. Those have to be, and you'll get sued if you don't. If the media comes in and asks for it, you have to give it to them, because it says in any other interested parties or persons. And so your school budget and your school improvement plan is a public document. Those have to be made available. And if you don't, then you will be sued and you will lose. So you might as well know that up front. They have to be public documents. You're required, as I've told you, to evaluate certified employees and develop action plans. You have to put them on action plans. We'll discuss that when we get to personnel later. I'll show you my plan. I call mine MTSS for teachers, multi-tiered system of support. It is a plan to observe and to develop and to improve, and also, but it leads to an action plan. It's a legal plan that leads to that. You have to develop one of those. I'll show you mine later. You're required to do that. A friend of mine was high school principal. I was already in the central office. He was a middle school principal when I was a high school principal. By the time I went to central office, he made high school principal, but he was a good friend of mine. And he was at a local high school here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and opening faculty meeting of a school year several years back. Superintendent was, glad-handed and shaking hands, because the media is always at the big monthly one in Charlotte. Everybody's got their best suit on, wore their best wig. And superintendent said, sit down front. And he did. And he, was going through, the last year, by the time the first faculty meeting, you have your numbers from last school year, all your testing data came in, and he had him stand up as a high school principal. And the point of having him stand up and wave at the crowd and, acknowledging him and calling his name was that his school had fallen into the low performing category. But here was the kicker. Not that wasn't the issue. The issue was he did not have one faculty member on an action plan. Let me say that again. He had a large high school that was not performing and did not have one teacher on an action plan. Not one out of 200. The law says that you're to do that. That you have to evaluate your employees. We know that. And that you have to put them on action plans if they're not performing. He forgot that part. not one action plan in a school that size. Chances of that happening in a school like his is just means he didn't want to do it. So shortly thereafter, he was not principal there any longer. That's the way it goes. He did not fulfill his legal responsibility. And so that one will get you. You don't have to put people on, there's not some magic number or percentage or whatever, but in a high school that size, that was less than 50% of the students there were proficient on the end of course exam. What are the chances that nobody should have been on an action plan? That'd be none. I mean, they had a lot of new teachers there. I mean, it was, he just didn't do his legal responsibility. He didn't have any documentation. He didn't have anybody even in the process. He wanted to be everybody's friend. I bet didn't caller come by and see him when he lost that job though. Just a thought. Transfer, student records, eligibility certificates, and then the last one, to establish school improvement teams by the district policy. And every district has a policy adopted by their school board. And again, Dr. Maskill is exactly right. Most of them, they're all the same because they all work off the School Boards Association that defines who will be on your school improvement team. It's not just faculty. There's parents, community members, and if it's a secondary school, even students. The state defines who has seats on that. And if you don't do that, if you just get a bunch of the teachers that you like or friends of yours, that will not go well for you. That would be malfeasance. You intentionally did not follow the law for whatever reason. If you did not establish that according to your district policy, your school board policy on setting up and running school improvement teams, which are, of course, responsible to produce yearly your school improvement plan. All right. Let's see who we got. All right. So I have highlighted the laws for you and the most relevant areas where you get hit with negligence, that either somebody sues you or the superintendent gets after you because you didn't do your job. It was either misfeasance, malfeasance, or nonfeasance. You chose not to, you knew to, and chose not to. You did the wrong thing. You did the wrong thing for the wrong reason. Those are the areas that get checked on a regular basis. I can't tell you strongly enough, there is no such thing as comp time. It's not in the state personnel manual. It's not in the finance manual. Flex time is for extraordinary things outside of that extra duties assigned by the principal, and should be used very judiciously. But even then, as you heard Dr. Massengill say, it's still not legal. And your attorney will allow it, but will tell you, you're on your own. We won't support you if something goes wrong. This is not something that we will support. So if it happens and you get sued, you got to get your own attorney. That's the case with that. But yeah, that's the one that everybody asks me about. Everybody tells me, well, we got this system and that system and the other system. Again, it falls under fun and games until somebody gets their eye put out. Then it's not fun and games anymore. And especially if you've got to hire your own attorney. Anybody have anything for me before we go tonight? I appreciate you being with me. I'm looking forward to 2 weeks. Next week we'll start discipline, and we'll explore that one about your responsibilities, reporting responsibilities. When we talk about discipline, we're going to look at the reporting manual and what you have to report. That's a pretty big section on its own, so I just kind of moved through that one tonight. Let's see. And so the question
Dr. Lamb, yeah,
two-
the case study, sorry.
in class session 6 is when you do your case study. I always give you the 2-week notice. So between now and then, you got 2 weeks to be getting this thing together. I know how schedules are, getting everybody together and assigning responsibilities. You know how to do that, just like you did your PLC. You know, this is a little PLC. You know, roles and responsibilities, who's going to do what, where, and when, who's actually going to put all this stuff on the PowerPoint slides. Y'all got to figure that part out. That's how to set up and run a PLC. You know, let's see what you've done. See if they taught you anything last semester. I'm interested to see. All right. Anything else for the good of the group before we go tonight?
Dr. Lamb, I have a question about task 3, but I don't think it's for the whole group. It was just a question about what if your school creates the master calendar through PowerSchool?
Yeah. That's what I said. Most everybody does it and then translates it into PowerSchool. Now, some schools actually sit down on PowerSchool and build it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Some folks are good enough to do that. A lot of people claim they do that, but somewhere secretly they've got a whiteboard that's gridded off and they put the stickies on it and then translate that over to PowerSchool. The way you're supposed to do it is you sit down and build it in PowerSchool. And if you build it in PowerSchool, you have to follow the rationale. If you build it on your own, you don't have to. Again, the rationale is federal law comes first, then state law, then board policy, and then EVOS, best practices. Dr. Massengill is going to show us his principal portal on that information, which influences your schedule, who teaches what, where, and when. And then last is teacher input. So if you build a schedule by using PowerSchool to build it, you have to follow that rationale. But what I'm telling you is folks will say, yeah, we did that. But in reality, what they will do is they'll grid them off a whiteboard somewhere, you know, this period, this time, teachers, and they'll put the sticky, and they'll build it that way because they're not limited to the system that PowerSchool enforces on them of federal law, state law, board policy, EVOS, and then teacher input. It has to go that way. You got to build your federal classes first. They won't do it that way in order to not have to follow that protocol. Now, you get in trouble when that happens because usually you do something wrong. But that's what I'm telling you is I don't care how you do it, whether you do it the right way by using PowerSchool or whether you use the whiteboard. In the end, it better fit that PowerSchool. It better be legal in the end. Ever how you get there, I won't debate you on that, but it better be right. And so, Dr. Massengill, you might want to chime in on that one. I see you've written something. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just said that PowerSchool scheduler, I think, is what she's talking about. Where you can create schedulers and schedules in PowerSchool. The problem, I think it works really well for high school schedules because you can put the student scheduling preferences, what we call throw the schedules, where it will create the student schedules and sort of create your section. It really only works well for a high school block schedule because, you know, it'll tell you what you put limitations in for the sections that you built, and it will throw your schedule, and it works pretty well. The middle school level, you can, for your specials or your encore classes, it will work pretty well for that. But it's almost impossible for PowerSchool to do that correctly because of the number of constraints, what PowerSchool calls constraints, to do that for your core classes because of inclusion, resource you've got going on. So almost all elementary and middle school, you're going to find creating hand master schedules. Elementary principals, a lot of them, what you're going to be doing is they create their master schedule and then they would schedule what we call on the live side once PowerSchool comes back up. And so most of their scheduling is not done until, you know, end of July, August. Where middle school, we do a lot beforehand, and then we're putting new kids in when they come in. High school scheduling, it sort of seems odd, but because of the size of high schools and the complexity of the high school program, but their master schedules are the easiest master schedules.
Yeah. Now, what Dr. Massengill just explained, and I used to get into this more on scheduling, and I don't anymore because it's supposed to be done in PowerSchool. What he just explained is mosaic schedules, middle school and elementary with specials and pullouts and all that. Those are called mosaics. They're almost impossible to do on a computer program. We used to use Socrates back in the day, Charlotte Mecklenburg, before NCWise, which is now PowerSchool. And one of the reasons why we use Socrates is it was not linked to our data system so that we could manipulate it ourselves. You can't do that with PowerSchool. It's very hard to do a mosaic schedule in PowerSchool. But, you know, in the end, you've got to translate what you did on paper back into that. And it's got to fit within those constraints. And so that's the part of it. my point, the reason I stopped teaching all these different scheduling models is we're not supposed to teach you those. You're supposed to use PowerSchool. So the state has disallowed us from teaching you those tricks of the trade that we used to teach you. Now, everybody knows them and everybody learns them, and they're passed down from generation to generation. I'm just not supposed to teach you that stuff anymore. I'm supposed to tell you, the law says you will schedule using PowerSchool. I told you. Now, in reality, I know that's why you've heard me say it several times. I know somewhere in the principal's office there's a whiteboard hid where you're actually gridding it off and doing it. I'm not supposed to know that, and I'm not supposed to tell you that that's the way it's done. The DPI says I'm to teach you to use PowerSchool. But that's the answer to the question, is you're to use PowerSchool. But I know that's not the case, especially on those egg schedules. That's not the case.
Right. Thank you.
That's the party line, is that we use PowerSchool to schedule, and we would never do it by hand. It's always a fine line between following the law and doing things that are practical, just like flex time. But you know that there's risk involved if you step outside of outside of the legal boundaries. There's always that negligence, that malfeasance. There's always the chance that you're going to get caught and something bad's going to happen. And so, there's some risk reward in most everything. We're trying to mitigate the risk is what we're trying to do in this course. All right. I've had a good time. Y'all probably didn't have to listen to me, but it'll get better. I'll see you again next week. 2 weeks case studies, and y'all get to be the stars in 2 weeks. All right. I'll see you then next week.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.